Hi, I'm Kevin Jones, President and CEO of Ectobox. You're going to see a webinar on 2 approaches to extract value from your machine data using HighByte. However, we had a little bit of a technical difficulty, or honestly, it was actually me having the technical difficulty. It happens, what can you say? So you'll see the team pick up the ball and run with it really, really well to go over 2 use cases around using HighByte. It's a great introduction to HighByte and to what you can do with it. And honestly, I'm really thankful for working with such a great team. Enjoy the video, and please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like the video itself, and also if you want to reach out and talk about this kind of work or to connect with people in the video, let me know. Let's do it.
Well, I'll go ahead and start. So I'm David Schultz. I'm with G5 Consulting, and I work extensively with Ectobox using a number of their technology partners, including HighByte. So it's really great to be here today. There's a lot of really new, cool things that that HighByte has done with the Intelligence Hub, and I think we're both going to be demonstrating some of the new version 3 beta, some other things with that. So looking forward to working with the new tool and some of the things that it'll come up with and showing you how you build a unified namespace with a lot of different systems coming together.
I'll go from there. My name is Frank Galuska. I'm a senior IoT engineer at Ectobox. Like Dave said, we work with manufacturers to provide MES type solutions, and a large part of that is working with partners like HighByte in order to move that data around the plant floor and design, like Dave said, UNS structures to really format that data and make sure everything's okay in the proper place. And I'll turn it over to you, Kurt.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. My name is Kurt Peterson. I'm a sales engineer with HighByte. So we work with Ectobox and with G5 Consulting. These are our great partners as we look to help modernize manufacturing. Ectobox and David and all the rest have been fantastic in the consulting, the architecting, the implementation of those projects to make data more available, to make it more valuable to the business. And that's why we really enjoy being here today. So I think, Kian, if you want to maybe kick off on the slide deck, I think we'd be ready to go.
So we've already gone through some of the introductions. What we're going to be looking at is, HighByte is a data ops tool, and it's used for modeling your information. And we start talking about a unified namespace. It's meant to create semantic data models that present information in a common, consistent, structured format. And that's exactly what HighByte does. Frank and I have put together a couple of different models. We're using some machine data and presenting it to other parts within a manufacturing organization. I'm going to be taking that a step further and actually walking through a use case of when you do manufacturing, what is your business workflow, and starting from the point of you either, there's a work order or a sales order that's been created. How do you get that to the plant floor and start receiving that machine data so you can look at all of that information in context in real time? I believe we're going to go into Kurt. You're going to talk a little bit about, the preview of coming attractions within the 3.0, and then we'll finally wind up with some Q&A at the end. And I suspect there'll be some fantastic conversation and interaction that we have. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to start off with a model of a machine. And Frank, maybe it'd be best if you spoke a little bit about what it is that you've created and what we'll be looking at.
Yeah, so just a little background information and kind of walk you through this diagram before I share my screen here. So we have a bottling line being simulated by a Siemens S7-1200, and that's giving us some good machine data, such as in-feed and out-feed counts, downtime codes and reasons, as well as some process data around, heating coils and pumps and temperatures and pressures. And what I'm doing is I'm taking that data being generated by that PLC, and I should specify this is for 2 separate bottling lines. So, everything I just mentioned there, we have duplicate data off for twice of it. I'm using HighByte to connect to that PLC using OPC UA and pull that data in. And for now, HighByte's just pulling that data in, and I'll come back to it in a second. And I'm also using Ignition to capture that data and do some OEE calculations, some MES type functions. So, I'm taking things like the out feed and the in feed and generating scrap and my quality, determine when the machine is not running and calculate my availability. And as those metrics are being calculated and updated, I'm then, again, using HighByte to pull that information in as well. So kind of showcasing the power of HighByte there, connecting to two different data sources, pulling it in, and then in HighByte itself, I can set up a model and combine that data to export it to MQTT for easy consumption by Canary for historization and long-term storage. So that's really, HighByte's really at the center of everything here. And it's really what is allowing me to make that model combine both process data from the PLC and MES data from Ignition, and to really give context to both and say, okay, my current heating temperature is really high, it's causing a downtime reason, and that's impacting my OEE numbers. Cool. So with that kind of high level overview, I can share my screen here, and we can walk through kind of what I put together.
All right, sounds good.
So here I have a VM running on my local computer, and on that virtual machine I have HighByte installed. This is, as I believe Dave or Kurt mentioned, this is the 3.0 beta branch. So I know for me, one of the first things that jumped out was really the new kind of UI, much easier to navigate. And you can see here I'm starting with my connections. So I have my Siemens connection over here, which is a OPC UA connection, and that is just the IP of my PLC that I have, and communicating over a specific port. And what I went ahead and did is using the browse function here in HighByte, I can browse that OPC server and see my bottom line and see all of my relevant tags. And it's actually, this list is pretty reduced because I already have a lot of inputs and it's not letting me duplicate what I have. So from there, I can take these inputs and we can just pick line 1 in feed, for example, and I can do a manual read of that, and I can see, okay, we have 1,250 parts. Currently that's the current in feed count. And with this being OPC UA, this is set up to pull that data, I believe, every second. So we'll go ahead and refresh that page and get new data as it appears. I'm going to jump just real quick over to Ignition just to show in here I have that line 1 data, line 2 data, and then I'm calculating OEE based off of the information I'm pulling in. So I have my overall OEE. As you can see, line 1 is performing much worse than line 2. Big factor there is the performance. Performance on line 2 is all the way up to 88, and these are just simple OEE calculations that I'm not going to dive too much into. But now that these calculations are happening, the idea there is, okay, I want to get this information back into HighByte to combine it with that process data I was just looking at and make one unified model that gives context to all this information. So back in my connections, I have my Ignition connection here, just running on my local, just looking at my local host IP address. And you can see the only inputs I have are the OEE numbers. No need to bring anything else. That's the main function of Ignition, is to calculate OEE. So I can go to line 1 OEE and, just like we did before, read that, get value of 21. So now I have these two unique data sources each with multiple inputs coming into HighByte. And what I can do is establish a model. And what this model is, I like to think of it essentially, if anyone has a programming background, like a class in traditional programming languages. So you have all of your attributes here, and you can define your data types. They can be strings. You can let them be ambiguous. You can denote which ones are required or not, and even reorder things within this list. So you can see I'm just bringing in a couple of the process data, so like the in-feed, out-feed, my heating temperature, and a fault bit for my heating coil, and then my components of OEE that I'm getting from ignition. So this is just setting up that class, and then I need to make an instance of that class, and I actually have two. So line 1 and line 2, and I just went through here and using this handy references on the side, I can select my inputs, go to my PLC, and say I want to just filter on line 1. I just drag over my in-feed, get that value in, and essentially this is what makes that connection between the information in the PLC and the instance of the class in HighByte. So this is really where that model is being built and where I'm combining that data. So if you just go through the attributes here, you can see half of them are coming from the PLC and half of them are coming from ignition. And if we had other sources that, Dave Schultz is going to get into, like ERP or CMMS, we can add that information in as well. And just like with the inputs, there's this read instance option up here. You can see how your model is going to look just with each attribute and the current value. Very handy, just checking tool and troubleshooting tool. And what I did is just duplicated that effort for line 2, just changing my variables. So now that I have this information, I need to send it somewhere. And that's really where we rely on data brokers and MQTT. So we like to set up unified namespaces to organize all of our data and follow that structure of enterprise, site, area, line, and then cell. So for this example, new to HighByte 3.0, they have a data broker built in. So I've enabled that option and I'm running it locally. So I'm using their built-in data broker. And just simple connection, localhost with port 1885. And here I actually established outputs. So again, this is where we're sending the data. And you can see here, I just went through and added my group, edge, device, and metric names, following that unified namespace architecture, and duplicated that effort for both line 1 and line 2. So now I have, again, a place to send data, a model for that data, and inputs for that data. So now I just need something to trigger it. And that's where the flows come in handy. So I have line 1 and line 2 here. And all I'm doing is taking that instance, my line 1 source, and outputting it to the line 1 topic that we just made, that output on the MQTT connection. And I see a question there in the chat about the templating feature. So I'll just briefly touch on that. I'm sure, Kurt, you can probably explain that a little bit better than I can. But yes, you can use the templating feature essentially to modify this identifier, is my understanding. I'm not using it here, but we could, make that's the cache, enable a template and put in a variable or a parameter and say, it is line number and then a pattern to emphasize that. Kurt, you want to give a little bit more context around that?
Yeah, no, I think what you've done is exactly perfect. Basically, what templating is we're using parameter passing in order to, exactly what Matthew is saying, apply a single model to n number of instances, however many pieces of equipment you want to apply that model to, or batch reports, whatever it is that you're doing. Really powerful tool. You can do it here on the input side in order to template out instances. You can also do it on the instances side where you're actually referring back to that model. So yeah, really powerful tool. The real benefit that we see is the scalability aspect of it. We have lots of customers say, hey, we would not even do this project if we didn't have the ability to template out all those different models and replicate that model n number of times in order to support that. So really powerful ability. Mm-hmm. I would say the one technical hook on it, we do need to have standardized naming conventions in order for that pattern to be recognized. However, that we do find that in a lot of cases. So,
yeah, and I can just kind of tying that back from personal experience. I've used HighByte for quite a while now, and to a point where I've used versions without the templating, older versions, and it's definitely a pain. I had multiple. I think like 50 some inputs I had to make like one by one. It's definitely a time saver. So it's
probably saved you a couple of hours, couple of days on your life.
Yeah, but those are billable hours you're going to lose out on. Come on.
I definitely got rid of my need to do like the setting up like a JSON import. That was my main fallback for bulk input generation. But templating is definitely the better option there. Okay, so now that my flow is established.
Go back to your Sparkplug outputs real fast. So there was a question that came in around the Sparkplug and how you're setting up your enterprise, how you set up your group nodes and device IDs.
Oh, okay. So there it is. So to the HighByte modeling process. So
I think I can answer that one. So what I would say is that Sparkplug B, it does allow you to customize your payload. You can put custom properties in there and really kind of make the data look and fit how you need it to look and fit. And that is exactly kind of the ethos behind what we're doing with HighByte, not just for MQTT messages, but for a broad spectrum of whatever your data needs are on the shop floor or in the business. So our philosophy is definitely model the data for consumption at the final application. So if it's going to Azure, if it's going to AWS, if it's going to Sparkplug, make it look like how it should appear at the final destination, and HighByte's a tool built for that.
Cool.
And then
and then for Kenneth's question, I think that'll be more clear once you kind of go out and show the flows execute. Maybe hold on a little bit further in that.
Yeah. Just to briefly touch on it. Yeah. Essentially the enterprise ID, the group ID edge node that you're referencing, that is how the data is going to be structured within the payload. So I have a MQTT client here. And you can see that Sparkplug B and then that enterprise where my group ID of enterprise, my edge node of site, device of area, and then everything here is prefixed line 1, line 2, and then the property. And it becomes even more clear, Sparkplug has the data encrypted here. This is just a plain text client, but I'm consuming this data in Canary for historization, and that this structure becomes even more clear once I go over there. So you can see if I just edit this, not edit it, but add new trends to this chart, here is that architecture again. So HB HighByte, that refers to my data set in Canary. And then enterprise, site, area, in line 1 and line 2, that's where that architecture really comes into play, and where these group, edge, device, and metric names apply. So you can see I have all that data that I'm outputting readily available in Canary, and I can add things like my heating temperature, my I already have OEE, so I'll just add the heating temperature. And you can see, currently it's at 80.25, so that's the current value. And with the data broker and the flow setup, this will execute. I have it set up to execute every second. We could either change that to minutes, milliseconds, hours, whatever, or on the event if so desired. And you can also change it from always to only executing on change, which is nice. And then put in a expression here as well. But for the purposes of this demo, I just let it execute every time.
Perfect. Yeah, so a ton going on there, Frank, but I think just to highlight it one more time, we're connecting to disparate data sources, right? Coming in two entirely different systems, pulling those into some sort of standardized model that can be applied and reapplied to different sites, to different lines, and it's all going to match and be normalized. And then we're publishing to a UNS where other applications can go and get that data, subscribe to it, and then access it to actually drive some decision making. So a ton of cool stuff within that package and that short demonstration.
Great.
Yeah, and it's what Dave Schultz have is even going to build upon this and take it even a step further. So I think we have one more question from Kenneth about can these names in the outputs be variables or are they hard coded? And I believe they're hard coded. Is that right, Kurt? But they're unique per output.
So yes, they can be hard coded just like you have them here, kind of static identifiers. What we also allow you to do is we also allow you to write out to model properties or internal HighByte objects. So for instance, if you use a certain syntax, you can actually refer this topic structure back to your model. What that will do is for the different instances of the different models, they will dynamically pass their values for that field through to the edge node ID, device ID, and metric name. So yes, you can absolutely dynamically reference different objects within the Intelligence Hub in order to make this really scalable, again, from an aspect of you define the model, drive the model to the spark plug outputs, and then all of a sudden you're off and running. You don't have to touch it again. Pretty powerful.
And to answer Ricardo's question there about why I used OPC UA instead of MQTT to get this data from Ignition into HighByte, the answer quite simply is, not every platform is as nice and friendly as Ignition is. So I wanted to showcase that, HighByte doesn't really care how that data is being transmitted. There's multiple different protocols it can use. Things, I'll just quickly put in a name here. So I chose OPC just because, a lot of people might be working with legacy systems like Factory Studio or Factory Talk and other SCADA platforms that only communicate with OPC. So just wanted to give that example. But as you can see from the protocol list, I could have used MQTT, Modbus. I could have just brought in a raw CSV file for that MES data. So really it was just to kind of be platform agnostic and say, even though Ignition has all these protocols available, HighByte can handle anything you want to connect to.
Great.
And to answer Bastian's question real quick, sorry to cut you off, Dave. Yes, HighByte does have its own MQTT data broker now. And in the settings over here, you can see I just enabled that. I allowed anonymous connections and set up a couple of endpoints there. So that's a nice feature in 3.0.
Cool. Yeah, I think, Kenneth, we'll get to some commercial Q&A here at the end.
Yeah, Definitely, we'll put some pins in those questions about the broker and the licensing, and get to that at the end once we see Dave's part of the exciting presentation.
Yeah, I don't want to hog the spotlight too long. I'll kick it over to Dave.
Frank, that was excellent. Thank you so much. That was a great show.
Thanks, Frank. And while we're transitioning to that, I'm taking a look at the use cases I mentioned in the intro. We have to manufacture something, but how do we know what to manufacture? And that's usually informed coming out of an ERP system. So my workflow is I'm going to start by making a SQL query to what I'm going to call my ERP system, and I'm going to extract some work order information. From there, I want to make sure that when I publish that information, that it's actually consumed by the plant floor. So I'm going to have something that acknowledges the receipt of it, as well as populated into my MES. So my MES in this case, I'm going to make an API call to. One of the things that we run into a lot is, even though we say nodes in an ecosystem and the technology should be a publish subscribe, there's a lot of technology that doesn't support that. So you need to have some kind of tool, in this case HighByte, to facilitate a lot of that information exchange. So work order is created, it'll publish it into my MES. When that operations area actually schedules that work, the HighByte will note that it is actually scheduled. It'll retrieve through an API call the actual schedule, so you know who or what plant has it. When and it denotes the work order itself, when it's scheduled to start and when it's scheduled to stop. I will also have a downtime system in there that all of a sudden we're in the middle of manufacturing. I need to know that I have a downtime event. Then I'll want to start looking, is there a work order associated with it? I'll create a work order in a CMMS, populate that work order data to the information, and all of this will be visualized in real time. So you'll be able to see in the same context your ERP information, MES data, as well as some SCADA data and PLC data. So looks like I don't have a whole heck of a lot of time, so we can leave some time at Q&A. So I'm going to run through it quickly and keep your fingers crossed.
Anything can happen in a live demo. I think this is a cool aspect, Dave, because you're showing now the IT to OT bridge that HighByte is also very involved with a lot of the time. But, talking with factory assets, something we do every day, but really connecting that data meaningfully to the IT system, where it would traditionally be considered IT, is super powerful.
Yeah, agreed. So as I mentioned in here real fast, Frank, I really got into the tools. So, in terms of the connections, the models, the instances, and the flows, you notice here that I have several systems that I'm using. The ERP, I'm making SQL queries to, so I'm bringing in some inputs. One of the things you want to focus on is when you're making any kind of API call or a SQL query, that you don't tax the network unnecessarily. So don't keep asking for this very complex API or a complex SQL query. So make it very simple. So what I'm doing here is that I'm actually just seeing, did this max ID, did it change? And if it does change, then execute this next query. That's what I'm looking for there. On my MES, I have there's some inputs that are coming in. You can see I start to use some of the templating, but this is looking at bringing in some information from my performance on it. I have a work order. What's the schedule? So this is telling me when is it scheduled. I'm also looking to see, is it scheduled? So same type of thing. I don't want to start pulling information back until I know the information I'm actually looking for is available and ready to go. Using OPC, bringing in all of my some of my information that's coming from my PLC itself and publishing that out. And then also I have a CMMS payload. So I'm actually going out to my CMMS happens to be Upkeep, and I'm bringing through some various payloads that are coming through from that. In my models, I've created models of all of this information, and you'll see those models actually expressed in my particular demo. When I've created instances, this is where I've actually started using some of those parameters that I'm passing through. Even though I haven't extended it out and I only have one instance of it, the idea is on this pattern, I could make or create multiple asset IDs, multiple user IDs to pull that information back in my particular model. And then, of course, all of that is flowing, or that HighByte is now managing all of these flows. So not only is it modeling all of my data, bringing together information from all the different systems, it's actually operating as my workflow tool, so that the business logic is processed in a way that I'm getting the information that I'm looking for at the right time. So with that, we'll go ahead and go into my, my ERP system. I'm going to create a work order for my, what I'm calling my bug juice. So you can see when I create a work order, that'll get populated here. That work order is 23449. That is now updated. That tells me, that tells Flow that there's a new work order that's available. You notice that this work order payload just came in, and it's now telling me everything about this particular work order. Remember, it's all of the events that occur in a business. I want to know when that happens. So now that information is available to any system that wants to consume from it. As I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, not all systems have that ability to consume that information. So I've created a REST call to actually send this information out to my unified namespace. I'm utilizing HighByte. And you'll notice over here in my MES and my production scheduling, I'll go ahead and turn that off and back on. You can now see that work order was dynamically populated by HighByte. So I created a work order in my ERP. It told the system there's one available. HighByte pushed that payload out, and it sent that to my MES. So now anything that's in my ERP is now in my MES system. And I can, or into my manufacturing execution system, so that somebody can come in and schedule it. Well, now the next thing I want to know is, did somebody is this manufacturing work order actually scheduled? So I can come here, I can say, yep, I'm going to schedule this particular work order. I'm going to click save. This is where I'm going to come back into my flow, and I'm going to start looking for an instance. Now, in this case, it's a we're looking for a very, this is all hard coded in here, so there'd be need to be a little more logic so that when I'm looking for any work order that's being scheduled out there, that I can bring back multiple instances and multiple payloads. But the idea here is just to demonstrate some of the capability of it. So I can read the instance. I can now read that it is true. So it's telling me that that is available. If I come back to my unified namespace, this MES payload wasn't here before. It's now telling me, I have a new work order is available in my system. That is true. And then now I want to know, where is it actually scheduled? So I can see when I drop this in, this instance here, Frank was talking about, do I pull it? Do I do it on an event? I look for certain use cases to be, is it true, or during this particular condition, are those things all happening? You can see now here's my schedule date and here's my end date. So this logic is here at a work order was created. It sent it to my MES. My MES, my scheduler actually dropped it onto a line, and I can see in real time, it looks like the South Park plant. Line 1 looks like they have that particular work order, and it's all ready to go. Oh, you know what? That's still a previous one. Let me go back to HighByte and change that real fast, because we got to make sure we're keeping me honest here. So it's
Try to pull a fast one on us, Dave.
Yeah, right. Oh, gotta save it. So there we go. Now that's the new start. Yeah, people paying attention that's scoring at home are going to say, wait a second, what's the big idea? Now you can see I come over here. Now that I've made that change, my flow is looking for, is this work order that I'm looking for, has that been scheduled? Yes, it has, and it tells me the scheduled start, scheduled stop, that type of thing. So all that information is ready to go. We'll go ahead and begin the run on this. So I'll come over and we'll actually start that lineup. And I have the same kind of logic that there's certain things that aren't running until I actually, certain conditions are true. So now you can see my line is now active. I'm starting to make that product. I can come into my PLC and I can actually see my counts that are going up. And I've also instantiated my OEE engine, because now that I actually have a line in production, I want to know that information. So you can see here that I'm running my bug juice. I haven't done anything in my outfeed yet. All my numbers are 0 because they just got going. And once that calculation is actually done, you'll start to see all this information populate in there. So I know I just went through a whole lot of information in a very short period of time. Were there any immediate questions while we're waiting for this thing to actually do an update on the calculation?
Looks like there was a question from Ricardo talking about the API communication back to the ERP. And yes, we would be able to communicate bidirectionally with those kind of systems using the REST client connection.
Yeah, absolutely. In this particular case, I did just use for this connection, it is just a SQL call. And a lot of times, I've run into instances where people really don't like you touching the ERP if there's a compelling reason, unless there's a compelling reason to. So we want to provide some kind of flat file exchange. It's very common to have a SQL table that's published to a flat file. In this case, it'd be a SQL server, and I can retrieve that information from that SQL server. So that was really the use case I meant to demonstrate. But my MES is purely a REST client, so I am doing post and get from my MES, so I can bring that information back and publish it out. So now you can see that I've been populated here. So now I can get all my real-time stamps from my OEE system. It's getting updated. It's telling me what's occurring here on my what I'm running in the work order. And now you can see I have my in-feed counts. All of this has been populated. So you know what my in-feed, out-feed, what my waste, all that information. One thing I ran into here, and I wasn't able to resolve it, is that even though the payload itself is publishing out the proper OEE values, it's not getting displayed here properly. So something I need to take a look at. I'm using flat MQTT in this case. So as I mentioned in the last use case, let's get this over to today's date. And now you can see I have my production run here. And I'm going to go into my PLC and we're going to simulate a downtime. So now all of a sudden, there's a problem. So you can see now that I have a line that's down, it's created an instance of there's an unplanned downtime. You can see here in my PLC that value has changed, unplanned downtime. And now my caser is going to be looking to see, is there a work order that's been created? There's not yet, but we'll go ahead and we'll create a quick work order. I want that to be fixed by 1:30 today. Estimated time, 1/4 of an hour. Category, damage. Worker, assign me. Location, this is the South Park plant. Here's my asset, that's caser 1. And I'll go ahead and submit it. You can now see I've created a work order in my CMMS. Come back over to my UNS. I can see on caser 1 in CMMS, I have a work order. It's been assigned to me, has all my contact information, tells me what's going on, gives me a priority, gives me a status, tells me what's going on. And so the technician comes out and clears that jam, gets it going real fast. And of course, we'll go ahead and get into the PLC, get that line back up and running. We'll start producing more goods. You can see all that information is captured there. And now I'm all back up and running. So, real quickly is just to, this kind of finishes it off, is that when I create the work order, HighByte was able to capture that event, publish it to a unified namespace. I was able to notice that that event occurred because my MES doesn't subscribe using the minimum technical. I created another workflow that HighByte then published that information using an API call. When that work order was scheduled, that schedule was populated into my unified namespace, so other systems could consume that as well. And then finally, if there was a downtime event, I noticed that and could also detect that there was a work order that had been created in my system. So if you remember what we started with on this, I had very little populated, but now in real time, I can see, is a work order been created? Is there, what's the latest one that's been created? I can see a CMMS payload that's still open. I can see what my schedule time is. I can see what my overall equipment effectiveness is, and all of the values there get updates in real time. And I can see all of my actual real-time counts that are coming from my PLC. So there we go. In 15 minutes, I demonstrated how you can have this functionality.
Nice. Yeah, excellent sprint. Dave, would you mind? So Kenneth asked a question about the flow execution. Would you mind if we looked at maybe one of the flows that has one of those conditions set so we can show him how?
So over here on the flow, I'm going to publish out my schedule, and we'll just pretend that error didn't happen. And so in this particular event, I only want this schedule to publish when this event is true. So as I mentioned on this connection on MQTT, I just want to know, has this been updated? Is there a new value here? So in my payload, boop, 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 it was this particular tag. So when this was set to high, that means that payload can run, is what I'm looking at there. Another flow where I used that was work order to MES. And this is actually, well, that's also on a change. Hang on a second. Work order, maintenance order. We'll just pretend that that's not happening because we know that it did. So this is actually using an expression of that. I'm going to continue to pull my, make that API call. I want to get this new information every 10 seconds. I don't want to overburden the system, but I want to do it only while this is true. So as my line state has to be 3 in order for that to be true, because otherwise, if I don't have a downtime event, there's really no reason for me to be pulling in and checking to see if there is a new work order. But that's how that logic was done. Does that answer the question?
So,
cool.
And the other thing that I would mention there is that, so we're looking at event type, or that's HighByte actually looking at the different element that you specified, right? Looking at that MQTT topic, when it changes, it does that. You also have more ability to define whatever logic you would like to see in that field. So, if you wanted, one of the things we do is we open up the hood on JavaScripting. So you can put some JavaScript in there, do threshold conditions, understand, when things change, when things match certain things. So it's basically the freedom to define how and when and why you send your data is entirely yours with a tool like this.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there's some new capabilities that the tool has as well that I haven't had as much experience with. But point is a lot of times I can get all my information into a unified namespace. When do I want to publish it? I mean, that's really the thing. Or how do I do my workflow so I'm not just constantly bombarding my system trying to extract that data as I work with legacy systems that don't publish and subscribe. And this is a way to do that.
Yep. And one of the things I'm excited for in the full release of 3.0 is also a more graphical pipeline manager that allows you to set those kind of discrete and complicated workflows in a much more intuitive and easier to grasp way. So right now we have flows, but we're gonna enhance that capability very soon. Not quite ready to demo yet, but it is. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to that. So were there any other questions that people had about the system that I built? Otherwise, I can stop sharing my screen.
Yeah. Any other questions on the API calls, on the the integrations with the more advanced systems or higher level systems? I agree, Kenneth. I think it is neat stuff. So
cool.
I think just in the interest of time, we were going to talk about some of the new things coming down the pipeline. I think the major one that I wanted to touch on is this MQTT broker that we're putting inside of the software installation package. And I think the question, one of the ones earlier up was, does that mean we don't need Hive? Does that mean we don't need, Mosquito or Cirrus or whatever Chariot, whatever other brokers that you want to say? So when we designed our broker, the reason we put it into the package is because we wanted to simplify the architecture of the unified namespace. We do not intend really to be what I will call an enterprise grade MQTT broker. So, Hive is used at BMW. They're doing all their vehicle statistics over Hive. We're not really concerned with that. We want our broker to be active on the plant floor at different sites and sort of constrained a little bit by the amount of data that we're pushing through and that. So we want to make it easy to view the data. We want to make the data more accessible by putting a broker onto our application. We help do that. However, you can fully integrate our broker with our Intelligence Hub with any other broker, enterprise grade or otherwise, kind of at your leisure. So we really try to be system agnostic because we believe that that's a much more flexible and powerful way forward.
Agreed. One of the conversations that I have is that there's these enterprise brokers that you can get out there. Is that something that's really appropriate in a plant floor environment? So having this tool already built in sort of eliminates some of the need to have something that, especially if it's a proof of concept that I want to deploy. I don't want to go out and buy a very expensive broker Even though there are some free offerings with some limited clients, I don't necessarily want to be constrained in that way. So having something right in a tool makes that very easy to get that fast time to value. Which is really so critical. I want, as they say, fail quickly, fail fast. We want to know something right away without making a huge investment. So Richard asked, how do you manage REST APIs in HighByte? So for all of mine, I passed parameters, and the way I pass those parameters is that you can actually parameterize that. So when I create an instance, I actually pass that parameter in as far as what it is that my endpoint happens to be. So in this case, when I was looking for a work order on a particular machine, the way that the upkeep API is written is I just pass in that actual asset ID. That's the information that I publish there. Same way I brought back my user information. I passed my particular user ID for that. So actually, when I make a work order call, it brought back my user ID is the assigned to person, and then I use that user to go out and or the user API call to bring back the my contact information that you saw there. That answer your question?
And one of the other things I would also mention is that maybe not in not this spring, but in future releases, we're also looking at incorporating a REST server into the HighByte installation package, as well as a broker, as well as an OPC server. So what you can kind of start seeing is that as we get these more infrastructure pieces and put them in the software, it truly becomes a single throat to choke where you can send all of your factory data and access it all in one place. So REST server coming, that will take that API conversation to the next level for sure.
Excellent.
So Bastian asked a great question. Okay, so like how does Intelligence Hub compare to Node-RED and compare to Kepware? And that's really good because I think that there are some overlapping Venn diagrams maybe. For Kepware, Intelligence Hub is not going to be a device level protocol library. We're not concerned. We don't really think that we need to reinvent the wheel that Kepware and others are doing so well. So we will stick to connectivity on data at a level that is about at the OPC server level and above. We're not concerned with going down to, Yokogawa, whatever kind of protocols. Now, Node-RED is an interesting tool because I think that a lot of things that Node-RED can do, we can also do as well. However, where customers come to us is when they have enterprise and production needs that Node-RED can no longer fulfill. Node-RED I think it's a wonderful tool. It's for smart people. It can do a lot. However, we have probably some more tools and some more features in the audit sphere, in the redundancy or high availability sphere. The things that you would expect from enterprise or industrial grade software applications. That's been one of our focuses. So that's where a little bit of where we differ.
Just to expand on that a little bit, Kurt. In my demo, I was saying I was connecting to a Siemens PLC I have on my desk here. The reason I was able to connect to that is because it was running a OPC server, like you said. Otherwise, I would have had to, use like a Siemens driver and use like Kepware or some other product to pull that information.
Yep, 100%.
Prashant asked a question, can I use two brokers on the factory floor in exchange? Yeah, there's several architectures that you can use for doing that. There's clustering, there's bridging, and you can have them bridge together as well. So there's many ways to do that. And the other one is still eliminate the need to model data at the edge. So that's HighByte is very good at doing that. So what Frank demonstrated in his is I have that PLC data, that edge data that HighByte consumed. But if you have technology at the factory floor that can do that for you, I'm a big believer in model the data as quickly as you can. With the balance of don't have 18 different places where you have to go in and manage all that. So there's some give and take on how you do it. Really it comes down to, I get asked this a lot, what should I use for blank? And well, it depends. That's the answer to many a great question. What's the problem you're trying to solve? What's the immediate need? But remember, whenever you're solving a problem, you also want to make it scalable and extensible. That you don't want to build in some technical debt where all of a sudden, well, yeah, but now I have this next use case and I can't do it. So HighByte can do it. I just say model as quickly as you can, but it all depends on your overall, where are you now? What are you trying to do immediately and long term?
Mm-hmm. I think where HighByte is really different in that case is we call ourselves an abstraction layer, right? So we're connecting down to the source material, but we're not actually changing PLC tags, right? We're reading it in, then we can do our own legibility translation at our level and then translate that on. What that means is that you don't have to go and change code all the time. If you want to change the model in the abstraction layer. It doesn't actually break anything in the source system. So that's an important feature set and an architecture decision that is based on reactivity and quickly iterating, so you can get better and better and better without breaking pipes, without saving all that time.
Yeah, so Jeff, hey, good to see you, Jeff. Wants to know if you can put it on Raspberry Pi. I have not done that, but
Absolutely.
Yeah, I figured you probably could because it's a Linux distro under the hood.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. So we can run in Windows VMs and Linux, Docker containers, wherever you really want to stick us. Now, there is a gating element. You're not going to be able to push tens of thousands of models and flows at millisecond rates on a Raspberry Pi because we do scale with available compute power. However, for things like more IIoT applications for like methane monitoring or environmental stuff, like absolutely putting us on a Pi is
so now you have something to do with your brewing project there, Jeff.
There you go. Only if you share. I think there was one more question about licensing. So HighByte is licensed by the site. So we have a professional license that is kind of, for one particular facility or one, 4 walls or one campus. You can deploy as many instances of Intelligence Hub as you need, unlimited users, unlimited connections, unlimited data flows. So we really kind of keep it simple and give you the entire menu. That's for kind of manufacturing sites where you built on plants and different centers. Now, we also support OEMs and distributed architectures, right? Where think oil and gas or think agriculture, different things. Environmental monitoring is another good one. And we judge those licenses based off of your deployment details and your architecture of that. So a little bit different, but in general, we're deployed on the site. We don't choke anything. We don't charge you by the tag. We don't do anything like that.
Looks like another question on HighByte versus the Cogent Data Hub. Data Hub's more of a Gazinda Gazauda, so it's going to take data from a particular source and present it in another particular source. Big difference here with HighByte is that you can model that data. So there was a question that was asked earlier about, can I change the payload dynamically? And it's when you create a model, that's actually the name. If you think of a key value pair, that's the name that you're going to get or the key that comes out. And that's the fundamental difference, is taking information from different systems and combining it into a common data model. That Cogent doesn't do that. But I'm a big fan of the Data Hub, especially when you start getting into, I just need to go from this legacy protocol to that protocol. Very good at doing it.
Yeah, I would second all of that. I would say that HighByte Intelligence Hub is focused a little bit more on data transformation, data contextualization, data movement on the edge, right? Modeling for consumption at the edge, so that whatever delivery system you're sending it to, it's already finished. So I don't view us as a brick in Industry 4.0, but we are the mortar between all of the different bricks, the connective tissue that keeps data moving smoothly. To that point, we don't do some of the things that Cognite does, right, from a visualization aspect or that side of things. So we're focused on letting other tools be that, because everybody already uses Power BI or their dashboarding tool of choice. So we would rather just serve that data.
Yes, Newton. Quick answer: yes. It's great at building a unified namespace. That's exactly what I did here with it. Yep. It doesn't do visualization. Again, this is data ops, data modeling. But yeah, 100%.
Yeah, that's really the backbone there.
Yeah, and there is a demo version.
And Bastion, there is definitely a demo. Yeah, so please contact us. That we can request, drop us a line on the website or something. We can definitely get that in your hands.
All right, cool.
Yeah, just on time.
Phew.
Well done, guys. We missed Kevin, but I think we comported ourselves fairly well in his absence.
Yeah, I'm going to poke fun at Kevin. That's why we're finishing on time.
No, but it's excellent. Thank you guys so much for sending that, and thank you all for coming and asking great questions. Appreciate it very much.
Yeah, always happy to put together demos, and me personally, I always like seeing Dave's stuff too. So
Oh yeah.
I was excited to see you be a participant as a viewer. So
Agreed.
Awesome. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody.